Summary of The Invisible Man by H. G. Wells. A strange guy, who is later identified as Griffin, comes to Iping and stays at the Coach and Horses Inn. He is fully covered in clothes, and he doesn't take them off even after the innkeeper, Mrs. Hall, lights a fire for him. Mrs. Hall sees that bandages are also on Griffin's face. Griffin is rude to her and keeps asking when he can get his bags from the train station. Later that day, Griffin says that he is an experimental investigator and that he needs his tools. The next day, the carrier Fearnside brings Griffin's luggage, which is full of science equipment, handwritten notes, and boxes of fluids, some of which are labeled poison. Later that day, Mrs. Hall hears the sound of bottles breaking. When she asks Griffin what's going on, he tells her not to worry him and that she can add extra charges to his bill. Griffin spends a few months at the inn. He doesn't go to church or talk to anyone from outside the village. He only leaves the village at night. The people in the town talk about him and make up many different stories about him. Griffin's neighborhood doctor, Cuss, comes to the inn to see him. He is shocked to see that Griffin doesn't have an arm, but he still manages to pinch Cuss's nose. Rev. Bunting and Mrs. Bunting wake up on Whit Monday to the sounds of the vicarage being broken into. They try to find the thief, but they don't see anyone. Mr. and Mrs. Hall notice the next morning that Griffin's room door is open and his bed is empty. They call Sandy Wodgers, the blacksmith, to change the locks so they can lock Griffin out. While they are talking about this, Griffin comes out of his room, which had seemed empty before, and goes into the parlor, which he has been using as a personal study. He locks himself in and can be heard screaming and breaking things. Later, Mrs. Hall asks Griffin why he hasn't paid his bill. When he offers her money, she is suspicious because just a few days ago, he told her he didn't have any. When the locals approach him at the inn, Griffin takes off his bandages to show them a black cavity, his face. When the locals find out the truth about Griffin, they run away in fear. Bobby Jaffers, the local policeman, tries to catch Griffin for breaking into the vicarage, but he fails and Griffin gets away. Griffin asks Thomas Marvel, a neighborhood tramp, for help outside of Iping. At first, Marvel thinks he's going crazy when he hears a voice without a body talking to him. But Griffin throws stones at him to show that he is real and unseen. Marvel is surprised, but he agrees to help Griffin. He goes back to the Coach and Horses and takes some of Griffin's things, like his notes, from his room. While Griffin was gone, Dr. Cuss and Rev. Bunting looked through the notes, but they didn't understand what was in them. Mr. Huckster tries to catch Marvel, but he doesn't succeed. Griffin breaks the windows of the inn and cuts the telegraph wire in the village before running away. No one in Iping can leave their homes for 2 hours because they are all too scared. Marvel wants to quit helping Griffin, but Griffin says he will kill him if he does. The next day, Marvel and Griffin get to the town of Port Stowe. Marvel starts talking to a local mariner there. The mariner tells him about the stories about the Invisible Man and shows him a newspaper story about what happened in Iping. Marvel says that he knows about the Invisible Man from private sources, but after Griffin hurts him, he goes back on his word and tells the mariner that the whole story is a lie. The story moves to a guy named Dr. Kemp, who is sitting in his office and looking out over the town of Port Burdock. He is upset by the rumors around town about the Invisible Man and the fools who think the story is true. Nearby, Marvel runs into the Jolly Cricketers bar in fear and says that the Invisible Man is after him and that he needs help. Griffin also goes into the pub, and there is a fight. One of the guys in the pub shoots into the air at Griffin, trying to hit him. Dr. Kemp's doorbell rings, but when his helper answers, she finds no one there. Kemp then finds blood on the doorknob and floor of his bedroom. Griffin talks to Kemp in his bedroom. At first, Kemp doesn't believe that Griffin is there. Griffin talks about himself and reminds Kemp that they went to University College London together. Kemp ends up believing Griffin, so he feeds him and gives him whiskey. He lets Griffin sleep in his room, and when he goes to sleep, he worries that Griffin might be crazy and homicidal. The next day, Griffin tells Kemp that he found a way to make live tissue invisible many years ago when he was studying light and optics. He didn't tell anyone about what he found because he was afraid someone would steal them. Griffin spent 3 years studying how to become invisible before he understood that he would need money to do the experiment. He took money that didn't belong to his father from his father, which made his father shoot himself. Griffin says he didn't feel sorry for or guilty about his father. Griffin says that he first tried his experiment on a piece of fabric and then on the cat of a neighbor. The cat's painful meowing woke up Griffin's owner, who began to worry about what Griffin was up to. Griffin then tried the experiment on himself, and it worked. He became invisible. He knew his owner thought he was up to no good, so he set fire to his flat and ran away. Griffin found that it was harder than he thought to be unseen out in the real world. People kept running into him. He was cold because he couldn't wear clothes without being seen, and he couldn't eat because food kept coming back up in his stomach before it was fully processed. He stole from 2 different shops, but both times he was very close to getting caught. He was finally able to steal clothes and other things to mask himself. He wrapped himself up to hide the fact that he was invisible. He finally went to Iping, where he hoped to keep working on his scientific study. Griffin tells Kemp that he wants to start the epoch of the Invisible Man by putting in place a reign of terror and killing people as he sees fit. He wants Kemp to work with him, but Kemp tells him he's going in the wrong direction. Colonel Addy then goes to Kemp's house. When Griffin hears this, he yells traitor and runs away. Addy and Kemp tell everyone in the area what Griffin plans to do, and a search for him starts. Lord Burdock's servant, Mr. Wicksteed, is found dead on the grounds of Lord Burdock's home. No one knows for sure what happened, but they all agree that Griffin is to blame. At Kemp's house, Griffin tackles Kemp and Addy and shoots Addy with his own gun. Kemp runs away and asks his friend, Mr. Helos, for help, but Mr. Helos says no. Griffin is chasing Kemp as he comes into town. Griffin is surrounded by a group of people who beat him to death, even though Kemp begs them to stop. As he dies, his body shows up again. In the epilogue, the narrator says that after Griffin died, Marvel became a landlord with the money he stole from him. He is now a renowned man in the area who has a reputation for wisdom. Marvel tells stories about the Invisible Man to people who walk by. But he never says that he kept Griffin's notes, which he keeps hidden and whose contents he doesn't understand.
About the author. H.G. Wells was born in Kent, England. Wells' family did not have a lot of money, and their salary was not secure. Wells broke his leg as a child. While he was healing, he read a lot of books, which made him want to become a writer. Wells worked as an apprentice for a draper when he was a youngster so that he could help pay for his family. Later, he became a teacher. Then, he went to college to study biology and joined the debating society there. He got a bachelor's degree in zoology in the end. His first book, The Time Machine, came out in 1895, not long after this. After that, he quickly put out a number of other books, such as The Island of Dr. Moreau, The Invisible Man, and The War of the Worlds. Wells was one of the most important people in the early days of science fiction. He correctly predicted many of the technological advances of the 20th and 21st centuries, as well as big world events like World War II. He was diagnosed with diabetes, and in 1946 he died at his home in London.
Hope we summarized it fully and you liked it. Please hit the like button and subscribe to our channel so that we are motivated to create more videos.